Good morning. What an honor it is to be with you all here today. My name is Niemi, and I'm the president and the CEO of CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. Before we start, I'd like to ask everyone to pause and to take a moment to just reflect on what 2020 has really been like for you, for your families, for your communities, and the world. I'm sure, like me, many of you have lost friends and family. Like me, you might be worrying about your parents, your neighbors, your friends. You wonder if your city or your country will ever bounce back economically. And what about our kids? Who in this audience can honestly say that our kids are getting their needs met socially, emotionally, or academically? Let's face it, we are all dealing with a level of anxiety that would have seemed unthinkable just a year ago. What we are facing is a perfect storm of systemic and interconnected issues and failures. In addition to the public health crisis, we have an economic crisis, a looming collapse of the social safety net, and an explosion of frustration over long-standing racial injustice in the United States and globally, and an educational crisis that is experienced from early childhood through higher education. Meanwhile, climate change continues to accelerate, and on all of these issues, every single one, there is unprecedented political divisiveness, not just in the United States. And yet, in all of this, notwithstanding all of it, I really do find myself to be grateful for doing what I'm doing, and I feel hopeful because I honestly believe that social and emotional competence is what will allow us to deal with, or even dare I say, solve every one of the crises I just mentioned. We as global citizens need to learn together and to work together in a different way. I feel hopeful, and I say so not because it's my job, but because I believe what Justice Advocate Brian Stevenson says. That is, he says that hope is the enemy of injustice, and if we are hopeless, we are part of the problem. One area of hope for me is COVID. I feel like this COVID-19 era has reminded us just how interconnected we actually are, and that artificial barriers, whether they may be country lines or the lines between home and work, are much more porous than they may have seemed even a year ago. Stark lines have always been drawn for convenience, to break down complicated systems and issues and silo them into bite-sized, more manageable pieces for understanding, for teaching, and for funding. For example, we often talk about or think about the entire social landscape, our whole society in silos, with artificial lines and false dichotomies, as though, for example, racial justice and education or climate change and poverty are not deeply interconnected, though we know they are. And to our detriment, we take a similar compartmentalized approach to education and to our schools. We often focus on academic learning that is easy to measure and quantify with tests, but we neglect to teach the social and emotional skills that are fundamental to human development and thriving. In fact, the way that we approach educating our children hasn't changed much since the last global pandemic that has happened over a century ago. This fragmented way of looking at the world, our schools, and ourselves does not correspond with everything we know about how humans behave, believe, or learn. We have a real opportunity right now to seize the moment for change and to optimize our systems for young people. The principles and practices of social and emotional learning help break down these artificial barriers and encourage us to look at the full holistic picture. Intentionally applying social and emotional learning practices and policies at school and at home, civically, and in the workplace can help us come together as one fully connected and thriving global society. That is what SEL is all about. It's about ensuring that the systems in which we learn, we work, and live are optimized for healthy child development, and that students and adults have the skills they need to navigate school and life together. For those of you who don't know CASEL, it is the leading SEL organization in the United States that was founded about 25 years ago. CASEL's work is currently focused in the US because of the immediate need in our own backyard to close the gap between what we know about learning and healthy development and what we actually practice in our schools and communities. We also know that SEL is culturally and locally defined, and we ourselves are learning every day about what works and why. We are a collaborative learning organization, which means that we reach across regions and sectors to ensure that we are all marching up the same learning curve together. Our work has three major arms: research, practice, and policy, that are all interconnected and braided together. We worked to undergird the field with evidence. We model and test how to implement SEL in complex systems in states, districts, and schools. And we work with state and federal policy to create the conditions for broad adoption. Our research is currently focused on understanding how social and emotional learning can be a lever for equity. And we are building, testing, and refining the frameworks that prioritize youth voice, family, and community. Our practice team works in schools and districts to support implementation and to build the tools and resources for scaling social and emotional learning. And our policy efforts are now working with 42 state departments of education and state agencies to develop guidelines and standards and to create a learning community that supports implementation. We are seeing unprecedented demand as well. Our resources are downloaded in 186 countries, and we are hosting regular webinars and conferences that have been attended by thousands of people across dozens of countries. While CASEL's work is largely focused in schools, this moment has shown us that SEL is necessary beyond classrooms. From virtual birthday parties and holiday celebrations, to starting school without ever meeting teachers and classmates in person, and office conversations reduced to online chat forums, social distancing has reminded us of the importance of relationships. The instant and difficult transition into quarantine and online interactions has revealed just how much we have taken our social bonds for granted. We now must consciously work to build and sustain these social bonds online, because our virtual interactions have shown the power and the necessity of connectedness in order to make progress in education, in business, and in personal development. SEL practices can help us create a stronger, more connected community in all aspects of our life. Today, I'll focus on three: education, workplace, and society as a whole. SEL research has demonstrated the positive impact on educational outcomes and on life outcomes, as measured by academic performance, better mental health, and pro-social behavior. We know that SEL also leads to improvement in social and emotional skills, attitudes, relationships, and perceptions of classroom and school climate. Because students have strong relationships and feel supported even virtually, they are more likely to engage. We saw this type of engagement when a district in the United States that had implemented SEL had 98% of students fully engaged in remote learning during the 2019-2020 school year, compared to 25 to 50% in other districts. Strong, supportive relationships between educators and students play a big role in success stories like this. And so does youth voice practices and family engagement, and the co-creation of solutions with families and students alike. The high rate of engagement and attendance also suggests that the districts had engaged in dialogue with the students and their families to identify and then address potential barriers for attendance, whether it was lack of access to the internet or no available digital devices, or being flexible with class schedules to accommodate for students who have to work, to help their families, or to help their younger siblings with their classwork. But SEL is far more universally applicable and can be used beyond the classroom, in workplaces or in the community. Especially in the workplace, the skills that SEL helps develop are increasingly being recognized as essential skill sets for workers. In fact, a recent report from the global management consulting firm McKinsey & Company specifically emphasized that strengthening their employees' social and emotional skills is key for businesses responding to change, especially as employees and leaders work to maintain their professional ties while being physically distant. Multinational professional services firm Ernst & Young agrees. Its well-regarded U.S. Economic Development Advisory Services recently stressed the need for collaboration in order to recover economically. And I believe that this starts with adopting an SEL mindset and approach to how we live, work, and learn. Encouraging the development of SEL skills and overall human development can only make us stronger as a society. 12 of the 16 skills in the World Economic Forum considers important for the workplace are SEL skills, such as managing people and peer coordination, and are universally applicable for students and employees in every sector. These are important both virtually now and when it is safe for people to return to in-person activities. Prioritizing SEL skills and competencies will help us break down the artificial barriers and create a more connected, resilient society in which we are in tune with the emotions and the needs of others as much as we are with our own. This can look like recognizing non-traditional working hours while employees work from home and care for their kids, or working with parents to incorporate SEL in the home. We have an opportunity to redefine how we approach relationships and emotions, not just virtually during COVID, but post-COVID, when we have found our new normal. Periods of great social turmoil are also moments of change, as we saw with the Great Depression, and they show us what is broken and inspire us to fix them. Looking at both societal and education issues too narrowly and not prioritizing our human development from students to adults is not working. And now is the time, now is the chance to reject the status quo and to collectively reach for something better. If you remember nothing else from what I say, remember this. If we want a world that understands how all of our separate realities, interests, and perspectives must work together, there is only one educational approach that has the power to accomplish that goal, and that approach is SEL. Join CASEL in the fight for a better normal. If you're interested in more information or resources, please do visit our website at www.casel.org. Thank you.